If this were a discussion class, and I were to ask you what you know about Sabbath, what do you learn about Sabbath in the Scripture? There would be a lot of different answers, I expect, and a lot of different perspectives, but my guess is that most of you would begin by talking about the creation story in Genesis, when after God had created all that there was for 6 days, God declared that creation was finished and God rested from his work. That is the first we know of Sabbath in the Old Testament scripture. And then, if you are a good Old Testament scholar, you know the 10 Commandments by heart. And you would remember that one of those commandments is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Following that brief sentence, there are some very specific things about working on the Sabbath. A long list of work that should be performed in the first 6 days, and the Sabbath, a free day of rest for God's people. So in each of those cases, in Genesis and then in Exodus, Sabbath is understood as a gift that God gives to people who are tired of their work. And then, moving a little farther into the Old Testament, in Leviticus, the Lord speaks to Moses and commands him to let the land lie fallow in the 7th year. So it is a gift not only to the people, but also a gift to the land, so that the land may lie fallow. Those of you who have farmed and even who have backyard gardens know that if we ask too much of the same plot of land over and over again, it does not produce in the way we want it to. So Sabbath was for wholeness. It was for renewal. It was for rest. Now, there is no question that for us, Sabbath is hard. We do not do Sabbath well, in the sense of completely resting from our labors. When we get to the New Testament, what we see of Sabbath is that what once was a gift to the people, a gift that God had given to his people because he loves them, becomes a point of contention. It is almost always in the Gospels a point of contention between Jesus and the keepers of the law. John 5, which I have just read to you, is a beautiful story. It is an encounter that seems almost to be accidental, but we know that isn't the way the gospel works. And in this encounter, Jesus meets a man who for a long time has been ill. And so Jesus asked him a simple question: do you want to be made well? And upon hearing the man's response and his long answer about why he has not been made well, Jesus says simply, stand up, take your mat, and walk. Jesus sees the need, and he moves to meet it as he can. Jesus spoke out of wholeness, out of healing. He spoke a word of life to this man. But the next sentence in the gospel, which seems almost like a throwaway line, is this: now it was the Sabbath. And so the man takes up his mat, begins to walk, walks into the temple, and the lawgivers are there saying, how did you get well? And the man says, Jesus made me well. And immediately, the scribes and Pharisees are after Jesus for having broken the law of the Sabbath. I follow the blog of a Lutheran pastor named Janet Hunt. In this past week, she wrote about a sabbatical. Like Matt, she is about to begin a summer sabbatical. And she talked about, in reference to that, a recent visit she made to the Art Institute in Chicago, which is where she lives. She said she stood before a painting there by French artist Pierre-Auguste Renoir. Now, you probably know Renoir as an impressionist. He was a contemporary of Monet. And he and Monet were really the creators of what we know as the impressionist method of art. And so the painting that Janet was looking at was one of flowers, a huge vase of flowers, and it was titled Chrysanthemums. And beside it was a note saying that this particular painting was created in 1881 or 82, and there was another note offering an explanation. In his words, Renoir's words, he says, "I just let my brain rest when I plant flowers. I just let my brain rest when I paint flowers." He said, "I don't experience the same tension I do when I confront a model." And you may know that most of his work is paintings of women or groups of women doing one thing or another. He says, "When I paint flowers, I establish the tones and I study the values carefully because I want to get their story right." Though painting was his work, there seems to have at least been a time when he was painting that he was able to allow his brain to rest. And perhaps that is true of Jesus also. As Jesus encountered the lame man, he needed only to stand still in the presence of God's good gifts, gifts of healing and wholeness and life. Though it was his work, though it was the work of Jesus to meet and greet and care and feed and heal, in this moment, it seems, Jesus was simply sharing the gifts he had received from God: wholeness, life, healing. And in that moment for Jesus, it felt like a continuation of who he was, not work to be accomplished on the Sabbath. While his brain rested, his spirit soared. And perhaps that's what we may also do with our Sabbath. Perhaps for us in our busy lives, Sabbath is a time to step away from that which crowds our lives and fatigues our brains. Perhaps Sabbath rest is about experiencing life and wholeness and healing. Perhaps for us, Sabbath is about sharing those gifts with other people. Whether we go out on the lake with them, or whether we play tennis with them, or whether we play golf with them, or whether we share life with our family in a way that might seem like work. If we can only step away from the anxious striving and find in what we do healing and wholeness and life and peace, we will have gotten at the gift of rest, the gift of Sabbath, which God offers to us. And sometimes, as we step away and let our brains rest, perhaps we may come alongside others who need to experience the gifts of Sabbath in much the same way we do. So Matt is now almost 7 days deep into sabbatical. I've only gotten 2 texts from him, and in the second one I said, it's hard to let it go, isn't it, Matt? And I haven't heard anything else from him. So I hope for you all a summer of Sabbath, a time to rest your brains and to embrace the gift of Sabbath, to experience wholeness, healing, hope, peace, and life. Life in the presence of Jesus Christ, whose healing presence makes us whole. May you stand beside the pool and dip your hand in and be made well. Amen.